right now you may be investing in putting a bay into service EVs and training a tech to service EVs. And you might not see the return immediately, but you can't wait until the return is going to be there. Because if you wait right now, you're going to miss the opportunity.
Great. Good morning. I'm Dennis McGinn, founder and CEO of vehicle reconditioning and communications company, Rapid Recon. And today we are having a special guest, which is Todd Campau, aftermarket practice lead for S&P Global Mobility. And they have just completed a study that is really fascinating, which has to do with the average age of cars and fleets and how that has been changing pretty dramatically and what it's going to happen, what we think is going to happen in the marketplace. So Todd, would you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your study?
Sure. Thanks, Dennis. And thanks for having me on the podcast today. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys. So my role is aftermarket practice lead. And the way I describe that for people is that I'm really responsible for reporting on the vehicle after your initial sale. Lots of people watch new vehicle sales and they pay attention to the volume of new vehicle sales and how that's trending. But that vehicle has a life cycle that goes on for many, many years afterwards, as you guys are absolutely well aware of. And that's where my focus comes in. How are the vehicles being used? Where are they going? How many miles are they getting? And what's their life cycle after that new vehicle time period? So it's a really fascinating marketplace, especially today, to be reporting on.
No, thank you. Would you, I'm sure this is a very big topic for fleet operations. And of course, we see a fair amount of that. And but we probably don't understand the dynamics behind it as far as the aging of vehicles. Maybe you could kind of put a frame around that question.
Yeah, I mean, vehicle age has been a very interesting factor to watch for many, many years now. I mean, going back to the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, that time frame, at that time frame, we sat around 10 years average age. And really since that time, it accelerated for quite a while after the Great Recession. It started to level off. And now we sit at about 12.2 years of age for the average vehicle age of the passenger car and light truck vehicle fleet in the United States. And really, essentially what that means is that based on the distribution of vehicles, there's a lot more older vehicles that are operating in our fleet today than there were even a decade ago. I think one of the things that came out of the Great Recession was people began to realize in larger numbers that vehicles lasted longer. And so they kept them longer. The costs went up. So their residual value stayed higher for a lot longer. The investments got bigger. And all these factors are contributing to vehicles needing to stay active in the fleet longer to serve the hundreds of millions of vehicles on the road for the population in the U.S. today.
So that brings up an interesting question. So you've got the useful life has gone up. Cars and vehicles in general have become more reliable, of course, since World War II and Deming and all the things that pushed, starting with Honda and Toyota and so on. So but then again, you have the business model of trying to keep new looking vehicles and working out there. But then there's the reconditioning aspect of those, of keeping them all up to date and keeping them on the road. And do you have any, I mean, I'm sure a lot of your customers ask you for advice. How long should we really plan on keeping these vehicles? It's a big number. There's a huge expense to keeping them not retired and keep them moving. So, what do you see from your customers? How are they looking at this, or maybe changing their decision process?
Yeah, I think everybody's wrestling with that question because it has really changed. I mean, in the past, you take your fleet customer, you mentioned a little earlier. In the past, a fleet might keep a vehicle for a year or two, especially a rental fleet. A year, it's maybe 40 or 50,000 miles, and you sell it. Well, today, number one, with the challenge in getting new vehicles, I think that's putting some pressure on those decisions. And you're seeing it at the rental counter right now that, you might be getting a vehicle that looks a little older, or in general, I think the rental fleets, they dropped their volume of vehicles available during the pandemic, and now they're struggling to get, they're in line with the rest of us for new vehicles, and they're struggling to get new units. So a lot of those decisions have changed. And I think, when you flop over to the personal side, the story is very similar. I mean, when you think about the vehicles that are in your garage, you might keep it a little longer because you have to finance it a little longer, because it costs so much to get a new vehicle. And like you said, I think everybody realizes now that vehicles are lasting longer too. So there's not the urgency that it's getting close to 100,000 miles. But one of the fascinating things in the past decade as well has been the increasing cost of the vehicle. I think wages really haven't gone up appreciably when you account for inflation in the past decade, especially for the lower four quintile earners in the U.S. It hasn't gone up significantly. The top quintile's gone up a bit, certainly, but for everybody else, it hasn't moved much, and the cost of vehicles have just continued to climb. So all those factors, I think, make people a little bit more comfortable with keeping that vehicle longer because they can, and because there's the need to fiscally.
Yeah, one of the things that we see in the buying process, the information that we gather on the reconditioning of the vehicle, what was done to the car in order to make it sale ready, and give it that life. The customers want to know a lot more about this, and I think, like you said, they're paying more. They're paying a premium, and they know they're paying a premium. So they're saying, well, we're going to keep this car longer. So I think it's going to stay in their immediate circle of friends and their own cohort, if you will. And then the other factor I think we see is that doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. I mean, we know all about the chips and the shortage and the fact that they're delivering cars that don't have heated seats or don't have a second key, and they're adding those later, kind of thing. And on the fleet side, we're all well aware, if we travel much, of the impact on that, because all the fancy new cars that the rental companies used to have and turn over regularly, and it's just not happening at that level. What is your thinking? What does the data tell you in terms of the trajectory of when things will start to change here, if you can even see out that far?
So we expect a chip shortage specifically, and let's make it broader because it really has broadened out. The supply chain challenges that the new vehicle manufacturers are facing, we kind of expect that those are going to last for at least through 2023, so another 18 months. Maybe toward the end of 2023, it starts working itself out. But 2024 is really when we think we'll see some of the pent-up demand, and I put the accent on some. There's going to be demand that was destroyed. There's new vehicle sales that are not coming back, but we will see some of the demand realized, the pent-up demand, as well as normal meeting current demand happening in 2024, 2025. So I expect that average age will continue, likely to climb through 2022 and 2023, just because, if you're not putting the same number in to the funnel at the front end through new vehicle sales, how can you expect to constrain an average metric from growing? I mean, there's not a lot of levers you can pull to keep it down, because we don't expect that the vehicle fleet is at a point where we're going to see a decrease in vehicle fleet size. So if the fleet continues growing and we're not putting in as many new vehicles in, average age is going to naturally have to go up. I think it'll be a little bit more rapid for the next year or so, and then it'll level off in the back half of the 2020s.
Okay. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least ask a little bit about electrification, since it is such a big topic. And, we're seeing long haul fleets trying to get all the way over to driverless opportunities and things like that. Now that's a little, I think it's a little far out there, but what are your thoughts about the impact and how quickly the electrification is going to come rolling into to that part of the fleet business?
So I think EVs are a very interesting subject because they get so much attention and so much press. But right now, they account for 0.5% of our vehicle fleet. It is growing rapidly. It's a very rapidly growing segment. The average age of electric vehicles is flat or actually declining because we sell so many new EVs right now as a portion of the electric vehicle VIO. But it is really small. I do think fleets, as you said, are really trying to move towards EVs. And so they may be on the leading edge a little bit as it continues to roll forward. But it's still going to be quite some time before I think EVs have a significant impact. And especially when it comes to your business, I mean, you may know even better than I do what you're seeing from an electric vehicle perspective. But EVs in the used space right now are still, they still seem to be facing a lot of challenges. You know, the residual has not been as strong, if it's not a Tesla, as we've seen on similar internal combustion vehicles. And so there's a little bit out there that I still think we don't know completely how it's going to roll out when it comes to the EVs in the used marketplace and for reconditioning, but it is coming. And the fleets are, you know, especially local fleets, I think electric vehicles are making a lot of sense. I think the Lightning and the Silverado are going to be huge. And that they're going to tell us a lot about what's going to happen with EVs, even towards the back half of this decade, I think.
Yeah, I live in Palo Alto, California, so my street I live on is half Teslas, and there are charging stations just about everywhere. So I'm probably in a little bit of a bubble of this thing and seeing people that are trying to get, you know, they have the wherewithal to kind of make their statement on this, and so I'm seeing the kind of rush there in people's feedback on that. But I see that going really well. I mean, people love the technology, even though they don't understand it. So I think from my standpoint, though, I think the dealers are not very comfortable with all of this yet. You know, you have to have a whole different idea what parts, and the technicians are completely different and so on. I mean, and so some of them are saying, you know, okay, we're going to have a dedicated, we got 12 or 15 stores and we're going to have one of them that's just going to be EV, because they don't really know. They're still trying to figure out, you know, what the demand's going to be and how to support these things. But they don't want to say no. I mean, they want to be able to take those trades, and if somebody has one. But okay, well, this is fascinating. Do you see the economy in the coming year, maybe just to kind of look over the hill a little bit, in terms of a lot of questions about, are we going to have a recession? You're right about wages are way behind, so there's going to be some effort there. But what do you think will come from from basically our economy in the next year that will impact this?
So I think maybe even more than the economy, I think that electric vehicles are going to be challenged by the supply chain, maybe more than even the internal combustion vehicles, because, you know, everybody runs around and saying EVs have a lot less parts than internal combustion vehicles, which is true. There's a lot less moving parts in an EV than an internal combustion vehicle, but there are a ton of sensors. And so there's a ton of processors, microprocessors. And so with the challenge we've had in the supply chain, I think the EVs are being maybe more impacted, although I think a lot of manufacturers are putting priority on EVs, and that might offset it a little bit. But I do think the recession will have some pressure, but the majority of EV purchasers are in that top quintile of earners. And, you know, none of us are insulated to the inflation we're dealing with. None of us are insulated to the, you know, the economic challenges, the price of gasoline and all those things. But that top quintile of earners that have bought the lion's share of EVs probably are a little less impacted. So I think the demand for EVs could stay where it's at. I think the cost of gasoline may encourage more EVs. That's where the balance will be, is if the manufacturers can react fast enough to produce more EVs to meet the demand. And I think that right now remains to be seen.
Well, this is really, really fascinating, and I appreciate you taking the time to add some comments. Any kind of thoughts here that you'd like to throw out here as to what's going to happen? I mean, your comments, I think, about the short. We we see the same thing. Shortage not going to change. But just a comment. We're seeing a lot more attention being paid to the reconditioning of these cars, obviously, because they're more valuable. They're going to last longer. People are paying more. All of that too is going on. So I think the same thing will apply across the board of the fleets. But it is a very different time, and I think it's going to continue to evolve from what we see from the retail dealer end of the side, and trying to keep both the customers' regular business and the fleets moving fast. So any thoughts that you'd like to throw in here?
No, I do think you're right. I think that the challenge for the dealers is really how far in do we go with EVs? And, I've been, the advice I've been giving a lot of people is right now, you might not, and you're in Palo Alto, so you're in a totally different world from a lot of the country. But right now you may be investing in putting a bay into service EVs and training a tech to service EVs. And you might not see the return immediately, but you can't wait until the return is going to be there. Because if you wait right now, you're going to miss the opportunity. I do think EVs are coming. I think that, the horse is out of the barn, so to speak. There's a lot of, momentum for the electric vehicle, and there's a lot of support throughout governments and obviously the environment and everything, support a move towards less greenhouse gas emitting vehicles. And so I think it's going to happen. It's just going to take some time. And I do think, like you said, I think they're going to continue to evolve, but I don't know that I agree totally that all of the maintenance is going to dry up for the EV. I still think EVs require calibration. They require maintenance. You're probably seeing it on the reconditioning side. One of the things I heard over the summer, listening to a panel, they were talking about how people seem to have a higher propensity to customize their EV. So, they might not be buying as many brakes or as many, oil changes, but they're putting that money in making it more personal, more of a representation of their personality than we've seen in the past maybe 20 years with the internal combustion engine. Because, back in the 70s, early 80s, even when I was young, you saw a lot of people doing work on their cars and customizing them and changing the tires and putting seat covers on and all that. I don't know if we've seen as much of that as we've gone into the 2000s and beyond. It happens still, but maybe not to the same level. And I think we're going to start seeing that with EV, where people, they want to make it their own.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate your time and appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, Dennis. I enjoyed it.